I'm James and welcome to Nomad Nuggets. Today's Nomad Nugget is all about primitives. Primitives are the foundational building blocks for almost everything you're going to create in Nomad Sculpt. There are several different primitive types and we'll cover those in future videos, but today we're focusing on the cube. So let's go ahead and add a cube to our scene. Up here at the top you'll see the little 3-box icon. This is your scene panel. Go ahead and click Add. And you'll see all the different things you can bring into your scene. Here are your primitives along with groups, cameras, repeaters, lights, and several other tools that we'll cover later on. For now, let's just grab the box primitive, and then we'll close the scene panel. As you can see, Nomad has dropped a 6-sided cube directly into the scene. I'm going to turn off the grid since we don't really need it for this nugget. Now, before a primitive is validated into a sculptable object, it has a degree of adjustability, and the cube is no exception. A cube has 3 axes that make up its overall shape, and each one can be adjusted independently. If you grab the center handle, it scales from the center outward. Or, if you grab one of the end handles, you can stretch or compress the cube in a specific direction. You can make it tall, thin, wide, flat, whatever shape you need. You'll also notice this lighter colored handle up here in the corner. This is your proportional scale handle. When you drag this one, the entire object scales uniformly, keeping all dimensions proportional to each other. Once you've adjusted your primitive to the size and shape you want, there are a couple more things that we should look at. First, notice that the edges of the cube are slightly rounded. If that's the look you're after, you can absolutely leave it that way. But if you want sharper edges, come down here to the 3-dot panel. This opens up additional options, but the one we want to focus on today is topology. Topology controls the density of the wireframe or polygon count of the object. Watch what happens as I move this slider. You can see the wireframe becoming either more dense or less dense, depending on the direction we move the slider. Let's go ahead and bring it up to around level 10. At this point, our cube is starting to resemble more of a wooden plank shape. Once you've got the size and topology where you want it, the next step is to hit the Validate button down here in the lower left. Now the primitive becomes a sculptable object, and we can begin using our sculpting tools on it. For example, using the Inflate tool, we can start carving a wood grain texture up and down the length of the board. Now remember earlier when I mentioned that primitives are foundational building blocks? Here's a good example. If we wanted to create a fence, the first thing I'd do is create a single board from the cube primitive. Then we can clone it. I'll grab the gizmo tool and start positioning additional boards into place. And just like that, we're already building a fence structure. Now there are definitely faster ways to duplicate and repeat objects, and we'll cover those in future nuggets, but this gives you a good idea of how quickly simple structures can come together using nothing more than the cube primitive. Let's add one more cube. I'll stretch this one out horizontally, compress it slightly, and move it behind our boards. Now we've got a crossbeam. At this point, we could turn this into a fence, a gate, a door, or even larger structures. That's really the power of primitives. They're simple shapes that become the starting point for almost anything you want to create. Whether you're building props, boxes, architecture, furniture, or even entire cityscapes, the cube primitive is one of the best places to start. And that wraps up this Nomad Nugget on the cube primitive. As always, if you have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our weekly live streams. And if you found this video helpful, we'd really appreciate you sharing it with your friends and fellow creators. We're also developing a structured Nomad Sculpt training series, so be sure to follow along and we'll let you know when that becomes available. Until next time, keep sculpting, stay creative, and we'll see you in the next Nomad Nugget.